If you don't understand exactly who you serve, then you can't effectively go and build lists to go and pick those guys out. Every sale happens in the prospect's mind, not in the salesperson's mind, so it's got to take place in their mind first, and that's the best way to bring it about. The companies that will grow the fastest in terms of the selling motion will do so by being human and having a level of human activity in there that others aren't willing to do.
Today we're going to talk about setting up a SaaS growth strategy. More specifically, how founders can quickly scale revenue and achieve a profitable exit. My guest today is Jonny Staker. Jonny has more than 23 years of experience in growing businesses, either as an employee, founder, consultant, shareholder, or investor. So he's literally seen all sides of the table. During this period, he has been a founder 4 times himself with 3 exits, and currently he runs the Vanquish Consulting Group, where he helps B2B companies with their growth. He even trademarked the Vanquish effect, which we're going to talk about today as well. Today, we're also going to learn more about this unconventional strategy he has, which could lead to limited scale for your SaaS and the profitable exit at the end. Welcome to the show, Jonny.
Hey, Joran. Pleased to be here. Thanks for having me.
Nice. I'm Dutch, so we're just going to dive right in. The title of the show even says, Achieve a Profitable Exit. Why is it so important to actually mention profitable just before exit? Like an exit should be almost profitable always, right? Or is it different in practice?
Guess it depends on the goal. For most founder-led companies, the profitable exit, the big thing really. And I know that it's a strange world that we're living in right now, and there's a lot of guys looking to just come out and chase the next shiny object. So it's not always the headline for everybody, but of course, a profitable exit is the key. You've built this thing, you've nurtured your baby, so you need the greatest multiple for it.
We're going to talk about growth. I would like to talk about misconceptions, mistakes. What is the biggest misconception people or founders have about growth that you see a lot of SaaS companies have at the moment?
I'd say that the biggest recurring thing I hear from founders is they want to go for volume immediately. So they want to fill the top of the hopper with leads and just automate everything. So they'll try to put tech on it real quick, and they want to be hands off. They'll say to me, I want the pipeline to run itself and just pick up the sale at the end and deal with that. But the issue is it doesn't work like that, because you junk the pipe, as it were, and you end up with disappointment when it comes to the number of calls that you're booking and the number of qualified leads that you're bringing into the pipeline. That's the first thing. And the second thing is founders expect content to drive inbound. So there's this big buzz around how do I get my content and how do I get inbound to deliver leads. A lot of the content and creators out there are quite misleading in that. So everybody's, how do I just drive inbound? I don't want to do outbound. And to me, both of these they're the paradox that the founder has to be involved in every part of the sales process, from ICP segmenting to the full sales cycle and the sale itself. Content alone will not drive inbound. That's what I'm hearing from founders.
So these are some common misconceptions, right? Are there any common mistakes companies make as well? Like you mentioned, wanting to automate things right away, wanted to go for volume right away. Any other big mistakes you see them making right now?
Yeah, that's the biggest one. Outsourcing is another one. Looking to outsource everything quickly, put agencies on it, or at the next level, fractional stuff. Agencies and volume services too quickly. They don't understand the business, the value proposition, so they just come in and pour gasoline at the top of the funnel and not a lot happens at the end. Outsourcing is another one that's, if it happens too soon, it's dangerous.
Nice. Cool. So now I guess we know the common mistakes, right? Let's turn things around. So if somebody wants to implement a growth strategy and they want to do it successfully, do you have any best practices on how to do it step by step? Is this maybe also where the Vanquish effect comes into play?
Yes, I look at the whole outbound motion as 12 pillars, really. So I would call it 12 pillars of high leverage outbound. But effectively, I would start with ICP mastery. Who is the ICP? It sounds like an obvious question, but most people have an idea. They can't just pick that avatar out. So before we build our network or lists, is this the right ICP? Do we know where they're hanging out? Do we know they are likely to convert on our service or product? That's point one. Point two is obviously power positioning. Are we positioned in the right way with our value proposition so that our ICP will understand what we do and it's a necessity for them rather than would like to have? Then we would layer up outbound prospecting, which look at differently. So right through the qualifying and the triage stage, leveraged outbound. So, platforms like LinkedIn, email, cold call, how we bring all those into play together. The content piece, I would look at content as part of a flywheel versus a direct inbound motion. Once we've connected or outbounded somebody, what do they see of us in our content? What do they make of us? Effectively treating that as we write our content for the last 100 people we brought into our world. And referrals, partnerships, affiliates, those kind of things.
Yeah, and maybe one question regarding the content. You mentioned you're targeting it towards the last 100 people you bring in. Does it mean if you talk about the funnel, you always focus on bottom of funnel content?
I would always look at it like that. So particularly with things like LinkedIn, everybody's trying to write content that just brings inbound. And I've had clients who bring in 1 million impressions on a post, literally 600,000 to 1 million impressions. The inbound they get from that isn't qualified, so it isn't quality inbound anyway. So you can get lost in that and just get lost in the noise of all of this stuff coming in and this is great, we're getting tons of inbound, we'll forget everything else. But it's a mistake because the only way you should look at it, in my opinion, is wherever it is, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's email, whether it's cold call, however those people were brought into our qualifying process, whether it's the last 100 connections or a website funnel or something like that, that's who we're writing for. So they can understand us, the product, how we feel about things, maybe our contrarian approach. So it's always just nurturing the outbound versus being an inbound machine, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. And I did interrupt you. So we were talking about the 12 pillars, right? As far as I have them, ICP mastery, positioning, outbound prospecting, support outbound with content, affiliates, partners, referrals. That's the last thing you mentioned.
Yeah. And then there's obviously events and workshops, which are hand raisers, as we'd call it, a hand raising event. And of course, the selling itself. So strategic selling, which is crucial in SaaS particularly, rather than product-based selling. It should be more consultative, more strategic. So that's the 10th pillar where we focus heavily. And then tech, AI and automation and sales motion optimization. What's working? Where do we apply more pressure? As far as I can see, in my experience, that's the 12 pillars of outbound that you need to do really well in all instances to succeed as a SaaS.
Yeah. The first two pillars you mentioned are ICP mastery and positioning. Like, for example, we even had April Dunford on the show, talks about positioning like quite heavily. I think that's all she does. How important is the foundation, which I think are step 1 and 2 in your case?
It's totally crucial. If you don't understand exactly who you serve, then you can't effectively go and build lists to go and pick those guys out. I often see when we look at, again, talking about LinkedIn, but it could equally be Zoom Info or Apollo lists that have been built. But when we go back and look at it, it's often quite illuminating for founders and sales teams when we look at it and they say, you know what, it's actually 70% non-ICP. I don't really know what we were doing there. So it's crucial. You're building lists that have been nurtured through newsletters, emails, outbound stuff, or LinkedIn connections. They're absolute gold to start with. It's obvious really that you should look at it like that, but not everybody does. So that's crucial to have that as just absolute gold. So there's only gold entering my pipeline in terms of my ICP. And then positioning is obviously layered on top of that, which is once I've sought out my gold, how do I appear to them when they see a social profile or an email footer, particularly in founder-led sales? How do they interpret me when I approach them? And the huge difference you make in small tweaks in headlines, bios, content that you write is just, we've just seen night and day when it comes to conversions. So those two, totally crucial.
Let's dive deeper in here. What is the best practice in this case? If people are listening now, okay, that sounds great, but what should I then do or change? How can they increase their conversions by changing the headlines, changing their bios to make it conversion ready?
Let's take an example. Let's use LinkedIn as an example, because that's where you and I connected. A lot of founders are seeing huge results with LinkedIn. So what normally happens is everybody's been educated into the norm and templates that we see online and the kind of advice that we see online and a lot of the big agencies, which is we position ourselves as we help X ICP solve Y problem in Z time using X method. And that's norm best practice, but it's often totally counterintuitive and quite a paradox that it can be the opposite. So if you were to look at LinkedIn and you start to measure, okay, we've gone out to 100 ICP in the last week and connected. So how many of those accepted? So you get right into the weeds of that. And if you're seeing less than 30% acceptance rate, so 30 in 100, it can mean that we're repelling maybe 70 in 100. Now, a lot of common logic would say we want to do that. We want to attract the core and repel the rest. But the issue with that is that according to the Chet Holmes pyramid, there's maybe 1 to 3% ready to buy now, but the next 40% is open to it and don't really know yet. And then there's another layer which is they've not really got a clue, but maybe they're open to it. So if you take the logic of crystal clear positioning and speaking to one person, then you're probably going to leave 60+% opportunity on the table. To summarize, first measure, and if we're not getting 50% plus acceptance rate, then we're going to need to tweak it so that it's not as. So a lot of founders will be kind of founder at Vanquish, so that it enables us to start an open conversation and bring in that 60% who don't know yet. And that's been crucial to a lot that have been very, I only want that top 3.
Yeah, and you said 15% acceptance rate, right? That's what we're aiming for.
No, 50.
50, okay, wow. Is that doable? I have a pretty okay-ish profile. Like, I think there's definitely things I could improve, but I think if I would run an outbound campaign on LinkedIn, I don't do it without any messages though, but I think my acceptance rate is around 30%.
Yeah, so 30 is the baseline where I'd want to see anyone. Common figures out there from a lot of the big tools and tech will say 16% is the norm, but it's because, as you just said, they're using connection messages, which is a no-no, and they're using very descriptive headlines, which ostracize a lot of the ICP who might be open to a conversation. So when you flip that, 50% is easily attainable with a few tweaks, but it takes some testing and tweaking. And we've got some clients who are 80%. So it depends on the niche, depends on the vertical. It needs to be tested and measured on a weekly basis to get to that.
Yeah, and again, it all starts with the foundation, defining your ICP, making sure that you actually, who you target, what you deliver to them, and then adjust that on your profile and tweak.
Yeah, just tweak, test, iterate. That's a lot of the stuff founders are frustrated with. They'll think, I don't want to be in the weeds doing this kind of stuff. But it's being in the weeds and doing that kind of stuff that moves it along, when you think the difference between 20% and 50% is an extra 30 of your ideal client that you may be able to speak to this week. It's night and day when you look at it at the end and you look at what revenue you're able to achieve from that.
Are you struggling to find a cost-effective and scalable marketing channel? Check out Reditus. We help you to have other people recommend your SaaS, and you would only pay them when they deliver you paid clients, making it a very cost-effective and scalable marketing channel. Want to learn more? Go to getreditus.com. When we look at the 12 pillars, the full growth program, where do SaaS founders struggle the most? Is it the foundation or the actual prospecting, or even further down the line?
I'd say that there's definitely two key areas where the struggle rears itself. The first one is the outbound stuff. Founders are busy. They're busy raising funds. They're busy trying to build a team. They're busy in the operations side. But it's an irony in itself, because many will say to me, I just don't have time to build outbound. So they'll try and hand it off. But founder-led sales are, I think, somewhere they convert 60% more than sales-led. So they want to hand that off and pass it off. So they struggle to carve out the time to dedicate to both building the outbound machine and putting in the work. Oftentimes, if the company is less than 3 million in revenue, the founder should be the one doing the discovery calls, and he should be the one, or the demo calls, and he should be the one triaging the qualifying process. So that's an area where they struggle, and it's usually, I shouldn't have to do this. Why am I doing it? And when they get over that and throw themselves headlong into that being the number one priority above all else, then it massively moves the needle. And then, of course, the next one is, we've come through all of these other pillars, we've got our heads around it, we're driving demos and we're driving discoveries, but our sales conversion rate is low. We've got to 5-10 of these discoveries a week, and we're not closing, or we're just closing 10% or less. So I think it then becomes, okay, we're not selling strategically enough. There's something going wrong in those initial calls whereby we're not actually converting clients. So those are the two areas, and the right attention applied to both, or the right pressure applied to both, is where growth happens fastest, in my experience.
Then let's dive deeper to strategic selling. I think a lot of founders now listening, like, maybe I'm not closing enough. What kind of advice would you give? What could they change to actually sell more?
The biggest mistake founders make is thinking it's a presentation about them. And I think that's the case in all sales, but particularly founders have got some element of an ego. We arrive at these calls wanting to whip out a pitch deck and start to talk about the company. It's actually the opposite. The prospect will tune out at that and lose the thread, and you'll feel that thread being lost. We focus a lot on this. So I'll work with founders. Probably 70% of my time is spent working on strategic selling. If you're talking more than 20% of the time during a sales call, there's something wrong. My clients will measure that using something like Fathom. It should be about asking the right questions, and primarily, it's, my friend Scott Leese would say that the three main things are: do they have a problem? Do they recognize they've got a problem? And is it urgent enough that it needs to be fixed? And if we can get a yes to those three things, then we're going to edge closer to a sale. So with some nuance, that's pretty much how it is. I always focus on doing the opposite of what I'm doing now, which is talk less, ask the right questions, and listen. That's the biggest mistake.
What I'm doing right now is try to shut up as much as I can, ask all the questions, and don't talk more than 20%. So that's what you should do during a demo as well. Ask the right questions. But because I think most founders struggle with that, people book a demo, right? We even have it on the site, like, hey, book a demo, and you want to show the product, as in that's what they booked the call for. Like, how should they overcome this mindset, as in they book the demo, I need to show the product, I need to show them what we can do, and actually go to selling strategically?
I think that mindset is exactly it. It's they've booked a demo, I want to show the product, but it's almost that has to be kept in the back pocket. I will teach founders basically part of the Vanquish method, but ultimately it's just 23 years of selling high ticket stuff. I'll teach them how to hold back from serving up the product too early, and it kills the sale. If you're just looking to interject the solution or the product or the demo too soon, it's going to kill the sale. So we'll always look at that consultative type selling and silo questions. For example, we have a 10-step process that we use, so it's a 10-step closing process. But inside that, there's silo questions, so we'll just keep going deeper. And so ultimately, we want the prospect to be asking for it. We don't want to serve it up. So if we do our job right in the strategic selling and a discovery call, the prospect will ask, how can you solve this problem? And a great way to do it is, rather than say, let me show you the product and how it can solve your problem, it's more, here's how we solved this problem, Acme Inc. And there's a short case study about how we did that. And that should prompt, okay, I'm interested to learn more about this. Maybe we could look at a demo. How do you work? And so that's, as Justin Michael, another good friend of mine, would say, it's the polarity shift. When the prospect starts asking you, I want to see it. So that's what I'd do, is hold it back and drive that desire first from the case study.
Yeah, it's really asking the right questions, making sure that they recognize they have a problem. And then in the end, they should be asking for the fix. And then from there, you can show a case study before showing the product.
In a casual way of, here's how we helped. And what happens is the prospect will see themselves. They've recognized the problem, they've acknowledged it. And so they'll see themselves in the case study. Every sale happens in the prospect's mind, not in the salesperson's mind. So it's got to take place in their mind first. And that's the best way to bring it about.
If we turn this into a best practice, we now know how to sell strategically. But if you take the 12 pillars, you take your learnings, and you can educate us on how to do it right, what is a best practice you can share to grow SaaS revenue?
It's a broad question. Founders are busy. They've been pulled from pillar to post. There's so much to do. So everything's done surface level. They'll drop a piece of content out, or they'll jump in and send a few DMs on LinkedIn, or they'll go comment on someone's post, or they'll, however you want to look at it, email, they'll drop into the cold email and tweak a template. Everything's done surface level. And nothing really happens because there's just so many things going on surface level. And it, as counterintuitive as it is, if you're going from naught to a few million in revenue and it's founder-led, which it should be at that level, then you need to pick a few things and go extremely deep versus surface level. It moves the needle the most when you start to really get into it. Like we've talked about, heavily look at optimize profiles, spend the next month absolutely nailing the ICP and building world-class lists so we've got nothing but gold across all 12 pillars. If founders will go deeper on these things, it's the fastest way. Slow down to go faster versus trying to hurtle through space at 1,000,000 miles an hour, just tweaking little things as you go. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think indeed, like for example, even when you start with the foundation, right? If you do your ICP definition quickly, you're not defining your goal. If you quickly do your positioning, you might not get everybody behind it and you clearly state what you're trying to do. If you're just trying to do affiliates on the side, you're not gonna get the most out of it.
Absolutely.
Nice. We always make it sound super easy on the podcast to follow the 12 steps, best practices. What kind of challenges, obstacles you faced or your clients faced while trying to grow, and maybe some common ways to overcome those?
Challenges. So particularly with founder-led sales, the biggest challenge is it comes back to bandwidth. And how does a founder balance everything else that needs to go on in the business with selling, basically. And I think it does come back to that, because when they're able to figure that out, every case is different, but it can happen with an element of automation. So you can start to say, okay, we've got to put the time into testing and iterating and figuring out what works before we can apply any tech to it. Once we know piece A works like a Swiss watch, we can put a piece of tech on it to take some of the load off the shoulders. But it's jumping to the latter that causes all the problems, almost like snakes and ladders. You're back to the beginning. It's bandwidth, and overcoming it is looking at which pieces are going to move the needle fast enough that we can leverage, and tailoring that to suit the founder. Everyone's different. Some are happy to spend 3 hours a day on sales, some all day on sales. Others are, look, I've got an hour to give to this. So it's about figuring that out up front, and then looking at how do we leverage your time versus some tech, some automation, maybe some support, because it has to happen over and above everything else. I'd say that's the biggest challenge I find.
Yeah, I'm a founder myself, small team. It almost sounds like I have to do everything. At one point, you can't do everything. We're dividing our time in many different things, nail it, and then only then automate it. But you can automate it, but only if it worked when you did things manual, when you actually figured out how should you automate it.
Yeah, because everybody's got it back to front. So everybody wants to automate first, and it's impossible. It's like trying to go out and play a round of golf before you've ever been to the driving range. It's impossible. That's why many fail. They will come to us and say, we've tried agencies, we've tried automation tools, we've done all this stuff, it hasn't worked. And it's because you can't go to the end before we've done the beginning, which is figure out 100% what works, and then say, okay, we'll take this segment and we'll place that into some kind of a tool. So there's no way to avoid that work. And if it's done up front, if you're willing to spend that time doing that up front, it just makes everything else so much easier, and revenue will grow so much faster.
With all the new tools coming on the market, a lot more people are going to automate things. How do you overall see the future of growth? What do you see things happening within the market?
I honestly think that all of the tools and the tech, and particularly AI, whilst there's a school of thought that says it's a red ocean because it's just going to be bots speaking to bots and AI selling to AI, I think that particularly for founder-led and for companies then that are able to train VP and then sales teams to behave in the same way that a founder would sell, in the same way that they've sold, I actually think that it's a great opportunity, because being more human than human stands out. In all of the outbound that I teach and that we do is totally counterintuitive. So when you look at AI, and that everybody's hyper-personalizing everything. So the days of somebody else who I think you've had on this podcast, like Aaron Ross, for example, those days were superseded by AI in the fact that it used to resonate when you'd write personally to somebody and acknowledge something and take that time, whereas now it almost has the inverse effect, where somebody sees that and says, yeah, they're just using Clay, or yeah, they've just run it through ChatGPT. It means nothing anymore. It leaves us with this opportunity. If everybody goes off, if other SaaS or competitors go off, automate everything, run everything through AI, we can train our sales teams and run our own sales motion by being far more human than that, and making our messaging look brief, blunt, basic, maybe a bit odd. There's ways I teach to stand out in the inbox and get tremendous results doing that, where people are inundated with messages, but they'll say, it just grabbed me, it just stood out. So I just think that the future for me is the tools are there to be leveraged, but the companies that will grow the fastest in terms of the selling motion will do so by being human and having a level of human activity in there that others aren't willing to do.
Yeah, it goes back to being like putting in the work and selling human to human makes complete sense. When I look at my inbox, either on LinkedIn or email, you can clearly see which tool they're using sometimes.
Yeah, you've got to beat that and look at what everybody else is doing and do the opposite. And I think generally with all of this, particularly in sales, that's a great motto to print out and put above your computer screen. If they zig, you zag, and you'll do okay.
Yeah, so I guess the advice here as well, you see all these growth tactics on LinkedIn, you want to then do the opposite of what people sometimes are saying. Cool. If you had to summarize your best advice on growth in 1 or 2 sentences for SaaS founders, how would you do
I think the main thread is be willing to prioritize the founder-led sales, be willing to get in the weeds and roll your sleeves up and put that as priority over all of the other things that are demanding your attention. Nothing else matters in a company under a few million. It's just sales prospect.
Yeah, it's easy to get distracted with all the other things, but in the end, focus on sales to move the needle. Nice. We're going to dive to the final 2 questions. When we talk about growing a B2B SaaS, like what advice would you give a SaaS founder who's just starting out and trying to grow to 10K monthly recurring revenue?
I would say that conversations are the only metric that you should be concerned with. So I'd say if you're looking at your Google Calendar for next week and it has 3 demos or 3 discovery calls on it, then you're flatlining, and that should be your only concern. So remove all of the noise and all the things that I could be doing, scheduling content, kind of internal meetings, product updates, put all of that to one side and focus on conversations. So how many conversations can I drive next week with my ICP? And I think everything can be boiled down to those conversations. And if you have 10 to 15 of those a week, then you're going to get to 10K very quickly. If you have 2 or 3 a week, it's going to be a painful uphill journey. So conversations is, again, print that, put it up above the desktop.
Nice. So until 10K MRR, focus on conversations with your ICP. Let's now assume we pass 10K MRR and we're going to make a huge step, I know, towards 10 million ARR. What kind of advice would you give here?
So I think obviously it's then a totally different game. So we've stepped out of the feasibility of founder-led sales, which usually peaks out at around 3 million. Things start to break and it starts to become impossible to do. So we've taken it to 3 million on founder-led sales, which I'd advise any founder to commit to. The next phase is obviously we've built this wonderful motion across 12 pillars. We're selling in a really human way. We're driving discovery calls and demos from very meaningful one-to-one conversations. That's great when it's founder-led. So how do we then go and replicate it? So the biggest challenge and the biggest focus then is that around that point, how do we find probably a VP of sales who shares the founder's ethos and vision for all of the things we've talked about, human-centric behavior, smarting the machines, that kind of stuff, and is willing to do the same kind of work that the founder would, because then that's going to be VP plus founder. So I think that's the biggest challenge most then find is, how do I find the right VP that we're aligned with? And then it's a case of how do we train our teams so that we can duplicate the same efforts across those 12 pillars and it doesn't break. And we don't start getting people going renegade, not following up in the wrong way, trying to automate too soon and almost undoing all the stuff we've done. So I think the next phase is about replicating the founder in a VP role and then training a team to behave the way we do to maintain results at scale.
Nice. Love it. Let me try to see if I can summarize. So we talked about how founders can quickly scale revenue and achieve a profitable exit. Common mistakes: go for volume right away, want to automate things right away, outsourcing things too quickly, bringing in the product too early will kill the sale during a demo. When we talk about best practices, a founder has to be involved in the sales process. Founder-led sales will convert more. I think you mentioned even 60%. Don't use an invitation message on LinkedIn. Sell strategically. Don't talk more than 20%. Ask the right questions. So figure out, do they have a problem? Do they recognize they have a problem? Is it urgent enough to actually get a fix for them? And if you sold correctly, prospect will actually ask for the fix themselves. When we look at the Vanquish method, the 12 pillars, start with the ICP mastery. What is your goal? Get your positioning right. Does your ICP understand what you do? Then dive into outbound prospecting. Support outbound with content. Focus on bottom of funnel content. Nurture the good leads you're getting in. Then try to go for affiliates, partners, referrals, event and workshops, strategic selling, which we dived into quite a bit, and then try to automate things with tech. Overall, I guess go extremely deep on certain things rather than staying on the surface, and being human is a great way to stand out in 2025. And when we talk about going to 10K MRR, remove all noise as a founder, focus on client conversations with your ideal customer profile, 10 million ARR, step out of founder-led sales mode at 3 million ARR, and find people with the same ethos/vision, replicate the founder, and I guess educate the team on the 12 pillars.
Yeah, sounds great when you say it.
These are all your words, just summarized by me. If people want to get in contact with you, how can they do?
Obviously, I'm massively into LinkedIn, so I've got a LinkedIn presence there. Reach out, drop me a DM there, send me a connection request, or Jonny at vanquishconsulting.io, and let's have a conversation.
Cool. We're going to add a link to your LinkedIn profile. Is there somewhere where we can also link towards the 12 pillars of the Vanquish method? Is that something online?
I've got a PDF on it, which kind of summarizes that, which I'm happy to share with you, or if you want to drop it somewhere. Other than that, vanquishconsulting.io, there's lots of stuff on that, and a great newsletter that's a minute long, quite contrarian, goes out every week, all around the 12 pillars.
Cool. Okay. We'll see how we do it. Maybe you can add a link where people can download it. So it's a lead gen for you. We can share the 12 pillars. And we're going to add a link towards the book you mentioned with the constant approach to do the opposite of what normal people do.
Yeah, I can send you that. Unselling, Kevin Casey.
Perfect. Cool. Thanks for coming on. For people listening on Spotify, make sure to respond to the poll. Always happy to hear what you think of this podcast episode. If you haven't done so, please leave us a review so we can boost the algorithms. Thanks again, Jonny.
Thanks so much, Yora. Really enjoyed it.
Good. Me too. Thanks. Thank you for watching this show of the Grow Your B2B SaaS podcast. You made it till the end, so I think we can assume you like this content. If you did, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. If you like this content, feel free to reach out if you want to sponsor the show. If you have a specific guest in mind, if you have a specific topic you want us to cover, reach out to me on LinkedIn. More than happy to take a look at it. If you want to know more about Reditus, feel free to reach out as well. But for now, have a great day and good luck growing your B2B SaaS.